had trouble getting in. I don't know if anybody.
I can't be seen.
Right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Council, which is the first virtual full Council meeting following the introduction of regulations to allow remote meetings in light of the current coronavirus pandemic. My name is Councillor David Drummond. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. I would like to inform everyone that this meeting has been live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel to enable the public to observe the proceedings and to welcome everyone who is watching. Before we move on to the agenda, I would like to explain how we intend the meeting to be conducted. In terms of etiquette for the meeting, can I just remind everyone that they should mute their microphones and turn off their videos unless they are speaking. To allow everybody to manage the meeting, if any members wish to speak, please indicate using their hand function on the Teams platform. When I call your name, you should turn on your microphone and camera and introduce yourself. As all members have been sent printed copies of the paper, I do not intend to share them on screen. For any member of the public watching, the agenda papers should be published on the Council's website. The agenda contains 5 motions, 2 reports, which will ask relevant members to introduce and move each item. Sorry, I'm getting an echo from another room. 2 seconds. Apologies. The agenda is 5 motions and 2 reports. We'll ask the relevant members to introduce and move each item, and the other members to be seconded. Following discussion on each of the motions and reports, I will invite the mover of the motion to report and exercise the right to reply, and I will then ask members to vote. The vote will be conducted by roll call, and once your name has been called by the head of Law and Governance, Bryn Roberts, can you please turn on your microphone and camera and indicate how you wish to vote. Before we deal with the formalities of apologies, absences and declarations of interest and confirmation of minutes, I wish to inform the Council that the former Councillor Phil O'Keefe has sadly passed away. Phil served as a member of North Tyneside Council from 1988 to 2000. He was the first elected as member for Ward of Churton in 1988 to 1992, and from 1992 to 2000 in Collinwood Ward. Can I ask that everybody observes a minute's silence, please? Thank you for a minute's silence. I'll now move on to item agenda number 1. I've received apologies from Councillor Burtis, Councillor Wendy Lott, Councillor Tommy Mulvanna, Councillor Maureen Madden. I know Councillor Rankin's going to be late. Any other apologies? Thank you. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Can I remind members that they have any registrable or non-registrable interests in matters arising on the agenda? And the nature of the interest, they must verbally declare these in respect of any item of business to be discussed at the meeting and the nature of such interest. You'll be invited to discuss any dispensations from the requirements to declare any registrable interests and or non-registrable interests that have been granted in respect of matters appearing on the agenda. Council is asked to note that Councillor Peter Early has advised that he has a registrable personal interest in agenda item number 5, the freedom of the borough, as he is a trustee of North Tyneside Carer Centre, and he has indicated that he will not be taking part in the discussion or voting. Do any other members have any declarations of interest? Thank you. Item number 3.
Chair, if I may, I'm aware that Councillor Anthony McMullen also has an interest in relation to the first motion that's to be debated this evening, and similarly will therefore not be taking part in the discussion or voting on the item.
Thank you, Bryn. Item number 3, minutes. The next item is minutes of the council held on the 19th of March 2020, which has previously been circulated. I know it's quite a while ago. We can ask the council to confirm those minutes.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4, motions. First motion is invite Councillor Matthew Thirlway to move the motion.
Thank you, Chair. The UK's track and trace system has collapsed, and when I wrote this motion only a few weeks ago, track and trace was creaking along. Now it's buckled and crashed. It's not the world-beaten system we were promised. Let's be honest with ourselves. Everyone here is intelligent enough to know that, whether or not they wish to admit it out loud. We've all seen the stories in the news and in the papers. As someone who works in adult social care, I've seen firsthand how disorganised and ineffective the system has become. I wrote this motion because I was angry. Baroness Harding, the person who is essentially presiding over the disintegration of the track and trace system, has been rewarded with a promotion. I want to avoid being party political because while we disagree on many different issues, I honestly believe both Labour and the Conservatives, and yes, the Liberal Democrats, believe in accountability. We as councillors are accountable to our residents every 4 years. MPs and the government will seek re-election in 2024. But as a member of the House of Lords, Baroness Harding will never have to face a public election. And the government have shown they're unwilling to hold her accountable for the disaster that is track and trace. This terrible virus has killed thousands of people in the UK, and our economy has been devastated. A second wave is now here, more infections, more people dying, and we don't have a track and trace system that works. I ask everybody tonight to please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Thirlway. Do you have a seconder for the motion?
Yes, Chair, it's Frank Lott here. I'm happy to second the motion. And can I first of all say that I support Councillor Thirlway's call for unity on this motion. The future of our health services should be above political division, and it deserves a better appointment than this one. Diana Mary Harding, Baroness Harding of Winscombe, is a British Conservative Party businesswoman who takes the Tory whip, even though she's a civil servant, and I believe that that's actually incompatible. Nevertheless, she's been appointed to be the inaugural chair of the National Institute for Health Protection. So far as I'm aware, that whenever someone's being appointed to a position, people take note of their CV. Now, I had a glance at Baroness Harding's CV on Wikipedia, and it reveals why so many people, particularly those in the medical profession, have misgivings about her appointment. She graduated and joined the management consultant McKinsey. In 1995, she was appointed marketing director of Thomas Cook before moving to Manpower, Kingfisher, and then Woolworths. She also worked for Tesco and Sainsbury's before becoming chief executive of the TalkTalk Group, where in October 2015, she faced calls for a resignation after a cyber attack revealed the personal and banking details of 4 million customers. When asked if the affected customer data was encrypted or not, she replied, "The awful truth is that I don't know." The company admitted the incident had cost it £60 million and lost it 95,000 customers. Now, Baroness Harding's married to a Conservative Member of Parliament, John Penrose, and she's a friend of the former Prime Minister, David Cameron. She was appointed as a member of the House of Lords by David Cameron in 2014, and she holds a board position at the Jockey Club, which is responsible for several major horse racing events, including the Cheltenham Festival. And in that capacity, she must have given her approval to the Cheltenham Festival going ahead earlier this year, despite numerous similar events being cancelled. And that event is said to have contributed significantly to the spread of coronavirus. In May 2020, Baroness Harding was appointed by Health Secretary Matt Hancock to head NHS Test and Trace, and I think Councillor Thirlaway has given us an accurate description of her performance there. Many of the contracts for Test and Trace have been awarded to subcontractors who also happen to be donors to the Conservative Party, and I think we all know what a debacle that has become. So I suggest, therefore, that it's reasonable to ask, on what merit has this appointment been made? If you skip through her background, the bits that jump out are Thomas Cook, insolvent; Woolworths, bankrupt; Cheltenham Races, contributed to the pandemic; TalkTalk, lost nearly 100,000 customers with her as chief executive officer; and most recently, Test and Trace. Does that fill people with confidence about the future for the National Institute for Health Protection? I do hope that everyone here will vote for this motion, and might I suggest that failure to do so simply lends support to the continuance of this Tory chumocracy, where you're appointed because of your political affinity rather than your professional ability. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. This government's recent decision to replace Public Health England with the National Institute for Health Protection is not only badly timed, but also shows the lack of understanding government has of the work of public health within the councils. The National Institute for Health Protection brings together Public Health England, NHS Test and Trace, as well as the Joint Biosecurity Centre, but it does not include the important preventative role public health plays locally. Public health has been placed in local government for a reason, which is to tackle the underlying inequalities caused by the social and structural determinants of health. They also have a wealth of experience of dealing with outbreaks of infectious diseases, such as seasonal flu, measles, pregnancy advice, smoking and alcohol dependency. Public health teams working throughout the council have resulted in some positive improvements in both physical and mental health for the residents of North Tyneside. We have a brilliant understanding of good health promotion. Why this demand for a single large NIHP? Remember, the simpler you keep the organisation, the easier it is to manage. Test and Trace is such an example that if they kept it local, it would have worked. This monolith of a national organisation will not serve the many varied needs and demands that present public health service fulfills. and I cannot see why we're making this unnecessary change at this point of time in the middle of a pandemic. I support the other speakers to this motion, and I would like to see involved in a letter by the elected mayor that we keep the keeping of public health in local government, acknowledging their role in protecting the health and well-being of our communities. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hurst. Can I ask you to speak in the microphone? Thank you. Councillor Hurst, you got your hand raised. You wishing to speak? Councillor Sandra Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I support this motion wholeheartedly. Last week, Baroness Harding, as children had returned to school and freshers started back in, sorry, somebody else speaking. As freshers started back at university, denied not preparing enough for a second spike of infections. She has faced criticism far and wide, and even the Tory chair of the Commons Select Science Committee, Greg Clark, said it was dispiriting that, and I quote, more had not been done to prepare for circumstances which are entirely predictable. Allegedly, this is a temporary appointment. It is unwise, and I fully support this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if the movers of the motion could tell me what qualifications they have to make the decision as to whether Baroness Harding is a suitable appointment, and if they could outline to the Council what experience and expertise they each have in this area, or is this possibly just a political motion again?
Thank you, Councillor Austin. I'll bring that in later on when I invite the mover that exercise is right. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. Judith Wallace, St Mary's Ward. I think this motion, Chairman, completely fails to acknowledge the huge achievements that we have had in test and trace. Our testing capacity is absolutely enormous in this country, and we are testing far more people than most other countries. For example, there have been about 16.5 million tests in the UK, compared with 13 million in Germany, 8.8 million in Italy, 8.3 million in France. That's a colossal achievement. With regard to results, in-person tests, 89% of people get their results the next day, and nationally around 82% are being traced. That has increased all the time. I think it's astonishing that people tonight are claiming that there's absolutely nothing happening. I think a lot of work has been done, and it has improved all the time. Per capita as well, we are way ahead, for example, of Germany and France. And I think that this motion fails to acknowledge the huge achievements that there have been in track and trace. Therefore, I will not be supporting this motion. Could I also add at this point, Chairman, that I understand my colleague Lewis Bartoli, Councillor for Tynemouth Ward, cannot get a connection to take part in this Teams meeting, although he is trying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. I'll ask the team to have a look at that. Does anybody else wish to speak on the motion? Councillor Lord. Councillor Frank Lord. I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. I was asked what expertise I had in the health service earlier, and the fact of the matter is that I worked in the health service for a while. But in actual fact, what I was referring to was the Baroness's suitability for the job. What I have got is over 40 years experience of interviewing candidates for jobs, and I always had a look at the candidate CV to see if they had any relevant experience, and having looked at Baroness Harding's, I could find none. And as regards test and trace, can the Leader of the Opposition explain why people from Birmingham are being directed to the Isle of Wight for their tests?
Thank you, Councillor Lott. Does anybody else want to speak on the motion? Okay. Can I now ask the mover to exercise the right to reply?
Thank you, Chair. Just to be brief, just to reiterate that this is not about party politics. This is about holding a politician who has failed this country and who has put us back in our fight against this virus. I think as councillors, we need to write to the Secretary of State because the government aren't holding her to account. We need to do it for them. So I ask you to please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Thirlway. I'll now ask Mr. Roberts to go to the vote. Have you roll called?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will read the list of councillors present from the list of participants in the Teams meeting. It will appear in alphabetical order by Christian name. So I will start with Councillor Alison Austin.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andy Newman.
For.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brian Burdis.
For.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruce Pickard.
For.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carl Johnson.
For.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kath Davis.
For.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Davy Drummond.
For.
Thank you, Councillor. I now have Councillor Debbie Cox.
For.
Councillor Eddie Dark.
For.
Councillor Erin Parker Leonard.
For.
Councillor Gary Bell.
For.
My apologies, Councillor Frank Lott.
I was just about to say. For.
I have two out of order. Councillor Les Miller.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sarah Day.
Oh.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Janet Hunter.
For.
Councillor Janice Mole.
For.
Councillor Jim Allen.
For.
Councillor Joan Walker.
For.
Councillor Joanne Cassidy.
For.
Councillor Joe Kerwin.
For.
Councillor John Harrison.
For.
Councillor John Hunter.
For.
Councillor John O'Shea.
For.
Councillor John Sterling.
For.
Councillor Judith Wallace.
Against.
Councillor Julie Cruddas.
For.
Councillor Ken Barry.
Against.
Councillor Linda Dark.
For.
Councillor Margaret Hall.
For.
Councillor Matt Wilson.
For.
Councillor Matthew Thirlaway.
For.
Councillor Muriel Green.
For.
Councillor Naomi Craven.
For.
Councillor Nigel Huscroft.
For.
Mayor Norma Redford.
For.
Councillor Pam McIntyre.
Against.
Councillor Pat Oliver.
For.
Councillor Paul Richardson.
For.
Councillor Peter Earley.
Peter Early.
Sorry, I apologise, Councillor. Councillor Early.
For.
Councillor Ray Glindon.
For.
Councillor Sandra Graham.
For.
Councillor Sean Brockbank.
Against.
Councillor Steve Cox.
For.
Councillor Trish Brady.
For.
And Councillor Willie Samuel.
For.
Thank you very much, councillors. Chair, your result is that we have 36 in favour of the motion and 6 opposed.
Chair, you're on mute if you did say something there.
Sorry, has Councillor Rankin joined us yet?
I have no indication that Councillor Rankin is in yet, Chair.
Right, okay. Could I ask who's going to move this motion?
It'll be me, Councillor Carl Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. For most of us, the 16th of March seems like a lifetime ago, but that was the week that Robert Jenrick sat down and told every council leader in the country that this government stands with local councils at this difficult time. He assured them everyone needs to play their part to help the most vulnerable in society and support their local economy, and that the government will do whatever is necessary to support these efforts. Sadly, Chair, that has not happened so far. While this council has had free welcome tranches of funding, it does not go far enough. And across the country, there's a £7.5 billion gap for councils, not just Labour councils, Conservative councils as well. Councils that were on the front line of this virus, providing vital services, while the government divvied on a national level, councils saved lives locally. The Secretary of State and the Conservative Party in Westminster have let the councils down. We urgently need more funding to ensure that we do get whatever is necessary for councils. Councils are facing a perfect storm at the moment. This is not a great funding situation to begin with, never mind having just had 10 years of austerity in the previous 10 years. So I call on this council to ask them to write to the Secretary of State to ask him to honour his pledge to fund councils fully, back up the Unison campaign of back the £10 billion bailout for local services, and continue to campaign for a fair and decent settlement for local government in the forthcoming spending review. But yeah, so I move this motion, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Do you have a seconder?
Chair was the seconder, so I'm sure Bruce Pickard's the other. Yeah, there he is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll second this motion.
And in saying so, we have to understand that our council provides major life-protecting and life-enhancing services, whether it is the vast army of safeguarding and educational services provided by adult social care and children and young people, or the environmental protection, housing, leisure, waste collection, or our support for local businesses and jobs. Our services impact on every aspect of our health and well-being. Let's not forget that before this crisis, local authorities were already woefully underfunded. When we set our budget this year, it involved the council saving 4.67 million over the coming year and a predicted shortfall of 39.6 million over the next 4 years. We are a multi-100 million pound organisation, and not to have any guarantees of expenditure committed, the uncertainty created by the cancellation of the government budget announcement and another 6 months of restrictions, how are we supposed to protect our services, enhance the provision to support our residents and prepare a budget for this and next year? We are not a small enterprise and many of our services are delivered by large-scale procurement. For instance, care homes for the elderly, home care and support for vulnerable children. These suppliers need certainty of our ability to continue with the contracts. All we are asking is that the government makes good its promise to reimburse the council, but also needs to go further and recognise the long-lasting effect this emergency will have and the subsequent demand for additional services. I ask the council to support this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pickard. I now invite members to speak to the motion. I'll see Councillor Gary Bell has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to support the motion. As obviously can't remember for adult social care, the impact on the budget deficit will hit the vulnerable the most. So I'll please support the motion. I've not gone too long about it, but and I know that the Conservative and Liberal Democrat councillors as well do care about the council budget and our vulnerable persons. So hopefully they can maybe support the motion as well. And just for Bryn Roberts' information, Linda Bell has shared my computer.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. In this motion, the Labour group has admitted that money promised by the government so far has been received promptly, and a great deal of money has been made available to help deal with the COVID crisis. Grants distributed by the council, but with government money, have kept businesses afloat. The government has acted promptly and in good faith to fulfil its obligations and promises so far, and has put in place the widely welcomed furlough scheme and the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. I see no reason to assume otherwise for the future, unless, of course, the Labour group are following the frankly shameful advice of their MP, Kate Green, to use the opportunity and don't let a good crisis go to waste.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. Judith Wallace speaking. Chairman, the government has responded really rapidly to the virus outbreak, and there have been huge financial support in all sorts of areas right across the country. Specifically, local government has been provided with several tranches of money, which have been paid very speedily, including money relating to test and trace and for infection control. Huge sums of money have been provided. We know that the government is paying close attention to the economic position and is making new provisions all the time. We've heard further extensions and expenditure announced by the Chancellor just today, and I'm sure that there will be further announcements to come. And we are in a very good position to support the economy in the huge way that the government has done because of the good sound management of national finances since 2010 in addressing the disastrous position which they inherited from Labour after many years of mismanagement. Because of that, the government has been able to have such things as the furlough scheme, the huge tranches of money which have come to local government. And as I say, I'm sure that the Chancellor is looking at different sectors all the time, and we look forward to further announcements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Kath Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Make no doubt about it, the years, the decades of underfunding to councils has left councils unprepared for this magnitude of this pandemic. The money that's been actually given back to the councils doesn't even fill the shortfall, the gap that the councils have suffered over these many years. We've had so many cuts to local services that we've actually had to rely on really heavily during this pandemic. What needs to happen to really safeguard against the shortfall in funding and the cost that will bring without having that funding for tens of thousands of jobs in local services in this country? That we need to have this money because we need to be able to provide, especially as the second wave's coming, for the vital services that we've been providing already, and that needs to happen, and that needs funded properly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Ray Glendon.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, it's my role as current member for finance. I see our teamwork in trying to balance the books. And yes, we have had money off the government. We're being promised more, but we're not getting it. It's Councillor Pickard mentioned before, we are very, very short of money at this moment in time. And it's purely on a promise that we might get it. Councillor Wallace had said that money, the government's put through good financial management, they've put a lot of money back into the council. But it's not through good financial management, it's through borrowing. The amount of money that they've borrowed, and I'm not saying they're just wrong to borrow it, because we're in a position where something had to be done. I presume if it was a Labour government, it would have done the same. But to turn around and say it's through good financial management is actually wrong. I'll be supporting this motion. As I said, we have had money off the government. We've got promises to get more, but to be quite honest, a promise until it actually happens, you've got to start fighting. And this is what the motion's all about, to ask for more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glendon. Councillor Andy Newman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be very brief on this. I'm just quickly reviewing the motion again. And it says the council believes the government should honour their promises. That seems quite reasonable. It also says that we should write to the Secretary of State asking to honour the pledge. Seems quite reasonable. It says sign the Unison campaign, back the 10 billion bailout. Seems quite reasonable. The campaign for a decent and fair settlement. So I honestly have great trouble understanding why anybody would have any problem supporting this motion, and I would appeal to the members of the Conservative group to put aside party differences on this one and vote, because all it's asking for is more money, and I think in the state we're in, that can only be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Councillor Early.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the other things we need to acknowledge here is the tremendous work done by staff and partners in North Tyneside, all the staff of the council and the officers who've adapted extremely well to the challenges, continue to deliver essential services, delivered our services where necessary in a new way to meet the change in need for our residents, and really gone beyond the pale, worked very long hours, worked in new ways, moved into different sections where they could assist, and have done that to try and protect the health and well-being of our residents to the utmost extent that they can. But that does not come for free. There is a cost involved in flexing the way we deliver our services and the way we've had to deliver our services across the period of the pandemic. I know in my own portfolio there was extra cost involved in running the free school meal service when the schools were closed. There was an extra cost in children's services in that looked after children because the courts services aren't operating normally. cannot be released from care when they might otherwise have been returned to their families, and that all involves extra cost to this council, and it is necessary for that extra cost to be met in full. We have a promise from government that they will do that. So, like previous speakers, I don't see why anybody should object to us pointing out that that promise has been given and that we expect government to honour it. To do any less than that is to fail the tremendous efforts of our staff, our officers and our partners in local business, in the voluntary sector, etc., who have worked so hard to try and meet the challenges posed by this pandemic. And I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Early. Can I now invite Councillor Johnson to exercise his right to reply?
Thank you, Chair. It was all too predictable of Councillor Wallace to raise that the Labour government was in place over 10 years ago. That is an entire decade ago. The Conservative government have had 10 years under Liberal guarantee support for the first 5 years and 5 years on their own to sort out this mess that they say was there. They have failed. Borrowing continued to go up and will continue to go up even more because the Conservatives have not been fit to govern the country. Councillor Austin rightly identified that we do welcome transfers of money which have been given. The government have given some transfers of money to this council and it has been welcomed, but it has not went far enough. Local government workers have been on the front line of this crisis, going into homes where those people would not go and defending the vulnerable, ensuring they have enough resources to get by. We need more funding, otherwise, sadly, job losses around this country, other councils have already announced job losses around this country will be in local government. We need a fair funding. We need the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government to honour his pledge to give councils whatever resources necessary to do the job. So I'll absolutely be supporting this motion, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We'll now move to the vote. Can I ask Mr. Roberts to conduct the roll call?
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Alison Austin.
Against.
Councillor Andy Newman.
For.
Councillor Anthony McMullen.
For.
Councillor Brian Burdis.
For.
Councillor Bruce Pickard.
For.
Councillor Carl Johnson.
For.
Councillor Kath Davis.
For.
Councillor Davy Drummond.
For.
Councillor Debbie Cox.
For.
Councillor Eddie Dark.
For.
Councillor Erin Parker-Leonard.
For.
Councillor Frank Lott.
For.
Councillor Gary Bell. Councillor Gary Bell.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed, Councillor. Are you for or against the motion, Councillor?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor. Can. I'll move on for the moment, Chair. Councillor Janet Hunter.
For.
Councillor Janice Mould.
For.
Councillor Jim Allen.
For.
Councillor Joan Walker.
For.
Councillor Joanne Cassidy.
For.
Councillor Joe Kerwin.
For.
Councillor John Harris.
For.
Councillor John Hunter.
For.
Councillor John O'Shea.
For.
Councillor John Sterling.
For.
Councillor Judith Wallace.
Against. There is a terrible echo on this, Bryn, I'm afraid.
My apologies, Councillor. I'll see if we can remove that.
Thank you.
Councillor Julie Cruddas.
For.
Councillor Ken Barry.
For. Against, sorry. Against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Linda Bell. Sorry, yes. Linda Bell, please.
For.
And while he's there, can I have Councillor Gary Bell, please? No, I'm not getting anything. I apologise. Councillor Les Miller.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Linda Dark.
For.
Councillor Margaret Hall.
For.
Councillor Matt Wilson.
For.
Councillor Matthew Thirlaway.
For.
Councillor Muriel Green.
For.
Councillor Naomi Craven.
For.
Councillor Nigel Huscroft.
For.
Mayor Norma Redfern. Mayor Norma Redfern.
For. For.
Councillor Pam McIntyre.
Against.
Councillor Pat Oliver. Councillor Pat Oliver, please.
I was having trouble with the mute button. For.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Paul Richardson.
For.
Councillor Peter Early.
For.
Councillor Ray Glindon.
For.
Councillor Sandra Graham.
For.
Councillor Sarah Day. Sorry.
For.
Councillor Sean Brockbank.
Against.
Councillor Steve Cox.
For.
Councillor Trish Brady.
For.
And Councillor Willie Samuel.
Can I just also just at this point, Councillor Lee has just texted me. She's on the call, but she's not on. Her name wasn't called at the last vote.
I apologise, Councillor. I can't see her on the list.
Okay, so.
That's all right. I can. I shall revise. I will make one more attempt. Councillor Gary Bell.
For.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you then, Chair. The final result then is 40 in favour of the motion and 6 against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Could I remind members when they're not speaking to turn the video links off and turn the sound, the microphones off, please. Just it's eating the bandwidth up, and that's why we're getting echoes. Thank you. Now move on to motion number 3, signed by Councillor Kath Davis, Councillor Willie Samuel, and Councillor Brian Burdis. Can I invite Councillor Davis to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. The COVID Bereaved Families campaign are 1,600 in number and are calling for the government to start an immediate public inquiry into the COVID-19 pandemic. Lessons need to be learned as quickly as possible to save lives as this pandemic rages on. As we all know, we are already approaching a second wave of the virus, and we still need to be better. We need to be better than before. It's acknowledged that the government has said it will support an inquiry down the line, but what is needed is an independent and judge-led public inquiry, not one where the government gets it to mark its own homework. These families have repeatedly asked to meet Boris Johnson, and he has refused every time. They want answers to why patients testing positive to COVID were allowed into care homes to be amongst the most vulnerable in our society, why health staff had to look after patients without proper PPE equipment, putting themselves in danger of contracting the virus, or why the government delayed lockdown when COVID had already taken hold and cancelled the test and trace that would have been instrumental in containing the virus. Each one of these deaths, totalling over 45,000 and rising, is someone's father, mother, brother, sister, daughter or son. They need recognition of the trauma they have suffered and support. Sadly, the answers to these questions have not been forthcoming from this government. North Tyneside Council offers its condolences to the bereaved in North Tyneside and throughout the UK. By meeting the demands of the bereaved families, the government can protect other families from needlessly suffering and overwhelming grief that they are experiencing. I propose, therefore, that the elected mayor and North Tyneside Council vigorously promote the petition for the campaign covidfamiliesforjustice.com and to press the inquiry on government through our 2 members of parliament. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Do you have a seconder for the motion?
Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel.
Yeah, I'm just very happy to second this motion. I think on the previous motions we've talked at great length about the funding, the need for track and trace, etc. I think it's as well in this motion, particularly to focus on the deaths. The tremendous death toll this virus has taken, particularly in the first wave, and it is, as a councillor, the last speaker was saying, it is outrageous that the Prime Minister has not found the time to speak to the organisation representing these people. What we really need to see is an interim public inquiry. Now, I take the point, obviously, the time for full studies and research into what happened is when it's all over. But at this point in time, we've gone through the first wave. The second wave is just starting. It's really important to learn what went wrong. Did we shut down? Did the lockdown take place at the wrong time? Why was that people were taken out of hospital still infected with the virus into care homes and resulting in the tremendous death toll there? There are many lessons to be learned, and it's time that these were learned. And also, to just remember that this is not just something that's affecting the economy. There's a tremendous human carnage that's resulted out of this, and we really need to support the people on the bereavement. Every one of these 40,000 plus deaths that have taken place is a family suffering and having lost a loved one, and we must remember that in all this and try and find out why this happened and try to stop it happening again.
Thank you, Councillor Samuel. Can I now invite members to speak the motion? I'll invite a mover of the sorry, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman. I think firstly, it's far too soon to be talking about any public inquiry at the moment when we still have the virus amongst us. To do so, to have one now, would divert resources, precious resources, from dealing with the virus itself. And it is upon that which we really should be focused. Clearly, lessons are being learned all the time. We've seen much better treatments of those who've been infected. We've seen new uses for established drugs, which make the impact of the virus much less severe. And fortunately, we are seeing far fewer hospitalizations and far fewer deaths. And more is also understood about those who are likely to be susceptible, those who are likely to be unaffected or less affected, or to have very mild symptoms. Things have been learned all the time from about a virus about which nobody knew anything at the turn of the year. And secondly, with regard to the bereaved, of course we offer our condolences to the bereaved. Losing someone, a family member, a friend, a colleague, is awful. There can be few of us who haven't known the complete sorrow of grief and how awful it is. But I think this motion is in fact very callous and very unfair. It's unfair on those who have been bereaved by other causes. Always a loss is very keenly felt, and this motion ignores all those who are suffering the loss of someone who has died from another cause in the past few months whilst the virus has been here. For that reason, I shall oppose this motion.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to say that I don't agree with the link made in this motion between the COVID-19 pandemic, which is an act of God, and the Hillsborough tragedy, which was man-made. I think the link is politically motivated and doesn't help the fight against COVID, which we should all be looking to fight together. As Councillor Wallace said, lessons are being learned every single day as we navigate our way through this ever-changing and unprecedented event. Treatments are improving. Testing is currently better than any other European country. The death rate is lower, as are the number of hospitalisations. And again, as Councillor Wallace said, any and all deaths by whatever cause are a cause of grief and distress. And of course, we all offer our deep condolences to anyone who's been bereaved by COVID. But now is not the time to be diverting precious time, energy, finances and resources into an inquiry. It's too soon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Can I now invite the mover to exercise the right to reply?
Thank you, Chair. It is, I do find it concerning that Councillor Wallace thinks of it as a diverging resources. The resources that we could be saving on resources if we looked at this pandemic in a different way, in a different light. These families are only asking that they be supported and meet with and asking for an inquiry, because some of the things that have happened, such as the delay in the lockdown. I mean, we've heard tonight about the Cheltenham races. Baroness Dider was allowed that to happen. These are the kinds of mistakes that are still happening. We've just recently had a spike in the COVID because of the release of the lockdown, which scientists have said has been too early. And these are the mistakes that keep happening. And resources that would lead, a public inquiry would lead to more answers for these kinds of occasions, these things happening again. And also, it isn't politically motivated. Hillsborough, actually, when Hillsborough was investigated, immediately they did have different techniques. They did have a different system for letting in the spectators of the football matches. So that was an immediate response to the Hillsborough. And this is the same with the COVID. We've had too many mistakes being made during this pandemic. There's too many things that there's confusing messages. There's things that about lockdowns. There's things that people aren't being supported. We're not getting the support for councils with their public funding. These are all questions that needs to be answered. And also, at the top of this, these families are All they're wanting is for the Prime Minister to sit down and discuss them with them, and also to go through and give them some support. And I think it's the least we can do is make sure that we promote this petition and help this campaign and make sure that this happens for these people. We can't ignore this. It isn't the same as other loss of, I mean, it is, of course, any loss of life is terrible for the families, but this is a pandemic that could have been handled so differently, and we could have seen a lot less deaths. And I think the government needs to take responsibility for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Can I now ask Mr. Roberts to conduct the roll call of the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, we start. Councillor Alison Austin.
Against.
Councillor Andy Newman.
For.
Councillor Anthony McMullen.
For.
Councillor Brian Burdis.
For.
Councillor Bruce Pickard.
For.
Councillor Carl Johnson.
For.
Councillor Kath Davis.
For.
Councillor Davy Drummond.
For.
Councillor Debbie Cox.
For.
Councillor Eddie Dark.
For.
Councillor Erin Parker Leonard.
For.
Councillor Frank Lott.
For.
Councillor Gary Bell.
For.
Councillor Janet Hunter.
For.
Councillor Janice Mole.
For.
Councillor Jim Allen.
For.
Councillor Joan Walker.
For.
Councillor Joanne Cassidy.
For.
Councillor Joe Kerwin.
For.
Councillor John Harrison.
For.
Councillor John Hunter.
For.
Councillor John O'Shea.
For.
Councillor John Sterling.
For.
Councillor Judith Wallace.
Against.
Councillor Julie Cruddas.
For.
Councillor Ken Barry.
Against.
Councillor Les Miller.
Chair, it's Councillor Austin. I've had a message from Councillor Miller to say his connection's frozen.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Councillor Linda Bell.
For.
Councillor Linda Dark.
For.
Councillor Margaret Hall.
For.
Councillor Matt Wilson.
For.
Councillor Matthew Thirlaway.
For.
Councillor Muriel Green.
For.
Councillor Naomi Craven.
For.
Councillor Nigel Huscroft.
For.
Mayor Norma Redfern.
For.
Councillor Pam McIntyre.
Against.
Councillor Pat Oliver.
For.
Councillor Paul Richardson.
For.
Councillor Peter Early.
For.
Councillor Ray Glindon.
For.
Councillor Sandra Graham.
For.
Councillor Sean Brockbank.
Against.
Councillor Steve Cox.
For.
Councillor Trish Brady.
For.
Councillor Willie Samuel.
For.
Chair, can I interrupt, please? It's Sarah Day here. I was missed out, but for the record, I would vote for.
My apologies, Councillor. I apologise profusely. Councillor Sarah Day. So,
Chair, sorry, can I interrupt as well? It's Councillor Martin Rankin. I am now logged on. I'm also for the motion.
if I may, Chair, because Councillor Rankin joined the item after the item had commenced, he is not eligible to vote in this particular matter.
That's fine, no problem.
So that gives you, Chair, 41 in favour of the motion and 5 against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Can I move on to motion number 4, please, signed by Councillor Allen, Councillor Harrison and Councillor Burgess. Can I invite Councillor Allen to move the motion, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify the start of the motion, that the independent report was commissioned by the MHCLG, and the Local Government Association actually supported the findings of that independent report. So I just wanted to clarify that for fact. I would like to move this motion in the hope that the council will support and to indicate to government that we do not support their recent white paper. But first, I would like to go back in history to around 2011, when the Localism Act was starting its legislative journey. This is a short extract of what was said by the government minister at the time, and he's still in the cabinet. The time has come to disperse power more widely in Britain today. For too long, the central government has hoarded and concentrated power, trying to improve people's lives by imposing decisions, setting targets and demanding inspections from Whitehall simply does not work. It creates bureaucracy. It leaves no room for adaptation to reflect local circumstances or innovation to deliver services more effectively and at a lower cost. And it leaves people feeling done to and imposed upon, the very opposite of the sense of participation and involvement on which a healthy democracy thrives. I have long believed there is a better way of doing things. Today I am proud to be part of a government putting this vision into practice. We think that the best means of strengthening society is not for central government to try and seize all the power and responsibility for itself. It is to help people and their locally elected representatives to achieve their ambitions. We are breaking down the barriers that stop councils, local charities, social enterprises and voluntary groups getting things done for themselves. But we can go a lot further by changing the law. The Localism Act sets out a series of measures with the potential to achieve a substantial and lasting shift in power away from central government and towards local people. They include new freedoms and flexibilities for local government, new rights and powers for communities and individuals, reform to make the planning system more democratic and more effective, and reform to ensure that decisions about housing are taken locally. So with that summary of the Localism Act, I wanted to emphasise the commitment to have decisions made locally. The current white paper does quite the opposite and removes the ability to make key planning decisions locally. There are concerns that the new plans will lead to a rash of unsightly developments and clashes between neighbours. The new regulations will be less warmly welcomed by adjoining owners wishing to preserve the flow of daylight to the rear of their properties. If projects fall within the new guidelines, neighbours will be powerless to object. Opposition MPs have said that the move was a developer's charter, and the campaign to protect rural England said it was not clear how much local involvement there would be under the proposed system. Despite the government's insistence that the moves would create tree-lined streets and promote beautiful buildings, the Royal Institute of British Architects said there was every chance that they could also lead to the creation of the next generation of slum housing. They went on to say these shameful proposals do almost nothing to guarantee the delivery of affordable, well-designed and sustainable homes. The LGA said 9 in 10 applications are approved by councils, with more than 1 million homes given planning permission over the last decade and are yet to be built, and the system should focus on that. Any loss of local control over developments would be a concern, and this is why I want our council to give their support to opposing the white paper proposals. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to pick on the issues regarding local involvement and the importance of it. In the government's consultation document, Planning for the Future, the Prime Minister says that changes proposed will actively encourage sustainable, beautiful, safe and useful development rather than obstructing it, make it harder for developers to dodge their obligations to improve infrastructure, and opens up house building to more than just the current handful of massive corporations. And it gives you a greater say over what gets built in your community. Something I believe the white paper fails to do. To me, reading the report commissioned by the LGA emphasises why it's more vital than ever that planning should remain local. As Councillor Allen has said, it's vital that councils and local communities have a voice in the planning process and are able to oversee all local developments so councils can deliver resilient, prosperous places that meet the needs of their communities. In the white paper, Planning for the Future, it proposes an overhaul and streamlining of the current planning processes and contains 24 individual proposals. Among the proposals are a requirement for every area to have a local plan in place. Here in North Tyneside, following extensive consultation with our local communities, including house builders, we have our local plan that sets out how we see our borough developing over the coming years. Within the plan, as an example, it details the number and types of homes to be built, our transport needs, and how we will tackle environmental sustainability, all in order to meet our future needs. To me, this is proper local consultation with our communities planning for the future. Within the white paper, other measures include scrapping the current system of developer contributions via Section 106 agreements and community infrastructure levy. Section 106 agreements between developers and councils are tragically one of the only ways we get social homes built these days, due to lack of direct government investment. Removing that could mean the extinction of social housing. To me, it makes no sense to remove this route to genuinely affordable homes without a guaranteed alternative, promising only that they will not decrease. On the proposals within the white paper to reform the planning system, Hugh Ellis, Director of Policy at TCPA, Town and County Planning, criticised the changes, saying, "This kind of disruptive reform doesn't suit anybody, neither landowners nor developers. They're turning the system on its head at a time when it's working very well for the volume house builders. 90% of planning applications are approved, and there are about 1 million unbuilt permissions." He added, "It's diluting the democratic process." Zach Simmons, a planning barrister at Landmark Chambers, said, "Promises of radical reform can grab headlines, but remember that of more than 400,000 planning applications which are determined every year, over 80% are granted permission and under 0.5% are appealed to
the Planning Inspectorate. However, little has been announced on what measures, if any, will be taken against developers who do not use the permissions they have been granted. Chair, taking further planning powers away from communities and councils will only deprive them of the ability to define their area they live in and know best, and risks giving developers the freedom to ride roughshod over local areas. To finish, Chair, following a recent national opinion poll, when well over 1,000 people were asked, who do you trust most to make decisions about how services are provided in your local area, 71% of respondents selected local councillors when asked who they most trusted to make local service decisions. Whereas,
Harrison.
Finishing now, Chair, whereas 14% selected members of Parliament and 8% selected government ministers. Like others, I believe it is vital that councils and local communities have a voice in the planning process and can oversee all developments so councils can deliver plans that meet the needs of our communities. So, Chair, I would like to second this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Could I invite members to speak the motion, please? Do we wish to speak the motion? Oh, sorry, apologise. Councillor Pickard.
Thank you, Chair. I'll support this motion and would like to thank Councillor Allen for bringing this to the Council's attention. The changes made by government to the permitted development rights will have a massive change to the use of class system to allow high street uses such as shops, restaurants, cafes, professional services premises and offices to interchange without permission through the creation of a new broad commercial business class of service categorisation. This will have a profound effect upon our high street areas. An independent report, as mentioned earlier, commissioned by the Government's Communities Ministry into the quality of homes produced under the permitted development rights, concluded that the permitted development conversions do seem to create worse quality residential environments than planning permission conversions in relation to a number of factors widely linked to the health, well-being and quality of life of the occupiers. The report found that only 1 in 5 permitted development units met the government's nationally described minimum space standards. In addition, nearly 3/4 of the homes were single aspects having windows on only one wall. And more worryingly, the research found that at 240 permitted development schemes, 10 homes were found with no windows at all, a concern since a scheme in Watford which included flats with no windows. However, this is just one aspect of the quiet revolution that is taking place in planning legislation. There are 2 proposals from government. One is changing existing legislation, and the second is the proposed planning white paper, Planning for the Future. The changes proposed to the existing system cover the fact that the assess of local housing needs will be done by the government nationally, not by local people. The securing of the first homes at a discount. The introduction of first homes fixed proportion of affordable housing. This will reduce the flexibility of local authorities to decide on the appropriate tenure and mix. The temporary lifting of the small sites threshold. So where we up to 10 houses just over, we can then ask for affordable housing. That's going to move up to 50 or 40 or 50. So we'll have a reduction. And the current extension of the permission in principle, which will allow the large scale developers to get permission in principle, which would be easier than going for pre-planning commission, and then all they'll have to do is meet the technical content of the details. But the planning white paper is a major issue. This white paper fundamentally reduces England's current local planning system and replaces it with a zonal planning and national government centralised decisions. Under the zoning, there'll be growth zone, renewal and protection. And the council's view in planning will be now there'll be a national community infrastructure levy. But the worst part about that is that levy won't be paid until the point of occupation. So all the development work that goes on to get access to a site, new roads, roundabouts, will have to be done by the council, who will have to pay for it without any money up front from the developers. That is a massive burden on hard-struck councils for the financial resources. The targets will be set by the government. Every local authority will be given a target if that's what the housing needs are, irrespective of the present needs. And one of the major issues as well is we work very well with Newcastle and Northumberland because of the border areas we have. The duty to cooperate will be ditched and you'll just be given your number by the government and you won't be able to cooperate with other authorities to reduce those numbers down. The whole of the area about renewal areas will be the fact that they can rebuild within those areas, they can demolish, they can change things around. All of that will be deemed to have had planning permission. So in essence, what we have is a major revolution that is taking place, and nobody outside of people who are interested in planning are aware what's going to happen. And this will have an absolute major effect on all our communities. And I would like to thank Jim, as I said, for bringing this forward. Hopefully we can get on board with the LGA resolution, but also we need to inform our communities of what is actually happening to them. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pickard. Could I have Councillor Lott, please? Your hands raised.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to the previous three speakers because I've been able to delete large sections of what I was about to say. But the first thing I would say is that it's not planning, it's not the planning system that's the problem. North Tyneside has 2,400 dwelling units outstanding for which planning permission has been granted and not a brick has appeared on the ground yet. Nationally, that figure is over 1 million. There are over 1 million houses waiting to be built. Perhaps the government should re-examine and they would discover that the problem actually lies with the developers who, having gained planning permission, then sit on that permission waiting for the optimum